Yep, it is that time again. The tried and true, the classic, a whole nother discussion on everybody's favorite topic, job design. Now, I know this topic has already been talked to death and then back to life again, but with the promise of Evercold's evolved jobs on the horizon, I think it's about as good a time as we'll get to sit back and try and thoughtfully reflect on the job design that we've had for the last couple of expansions. Job design has been a very complicated topic in Final Fantasy XIV for a very long time now. Over time, the design identity of both the encounters as well as the jobs themselves have clearly shifted and changed pretty substantially. And while the designers have more and more clearly carved out their own little niche for what they expect out of encounters, there's been one question constantly plaguing both the design team and the player base as a whole. How do we accommodate older and existing jobs with this newer style of raid design? Fundamentally, I think this question, or at least something similar to it, is what leads to the job changes that we actually see. There has been a long-running sentiment in the community about how the design team is going out of their way to streamline or homogenize jobs, to lower the skill ceiling and skill expression available in the game, to make things more accessible, easier to pick up and play. And we've seen, I'll just say, signs of this over the years. Many jobs have had some of their rougher edges smoothed out. Dawntrail in particular has seen a pretty notable design shift, but these patterns go back much further. These are things like removal of timers and buff durations from jobs like Monk, Ninja, and Black Mage this expansion, the normalization of burst timings, and introduction of the 2-minute meta. Yes, the 2-minute meta has a lot to do with job design actually. Even things like the distinction of Barrier versus Pure Healer, or the Summoner rework back in Endwalker. This has obviously been said before already, but I think the main reason these changes have been made in the first place is to ensure that every job fits within the framework of their encounter design. They don't want jobs accidentally warping raid balance or for some reason being considered super unfavorable or unviable. I don't think their goal is to lower the skill ceiling of the game. It's to make sure that jobs don't cause unforeseen issues in an encounter, and they've expressed this a handful of times. With their explanations for job changes in patches now, they often speak about changes being made to help alleviate problems caused during battle mechanics. And this was one of their main stated reasons for why they're removing the 2-minute meta in Evercold. More so than anything else, they don't want job mechanics to get in the way of encounter mechanics. This is why we've seen patterns and similarities in the types of changes that have been made. For example, reworking buff timers, removing DOTs, and redesigning the gameplay loop elsewhere. Monks lost their DOT and had it replaced. Ninjas had Huton repurposed into a charge-based system. Black Mages lost their timer on Enochian. Even Viper, which had its Noxious Nash debuff removed extremely early into the expansion. Even if mechanically, these job rotations still retain a lot of similarities, this is a very deliberate and intentional design shift. And while this changes the feel of how these jobs function, in some ways, these changes actually give more flexibility to the player. DOTs and short duration buff timers often lead to strict timings when they need to be refreshed or reapplied. And with how encounter design has shifted in Dawntrail, bosses tend to move around a lot more, force you out of uptime, or just fully go untargetable more often. I think their concern here is that having these short duration DOTs or buffs could create too many unpredictable moments where maybe certain jobs just have a hard time keeping their timer up, or not losing their DOT, and end up suffering more than other jobs in their role. A pretty clear recent example of this is Red Mage in M7S, where during one of the last mechanics of the fight, ranged players end up tethered on the outside of the wall away from the boss. This specific strat was preferred so that the other melees could continue to hit the boss and actually deal damage. The issue is this also happened on a 2-minute window, which meant Red Mage, the only caster who was required to enter melee range during their burst, was kind of just screwed over. And so a patch or so later, their sword combo was changed to be fully ranged during modification to avoid this. Even the 2-minute meta as a whole is kind of an extension of this, because if the developers know when all the jobs in the game will be doing higher damage or focusing more on their burst cooldowns, they can intentionally design encounters around it. And I think this approach does work in some contexts, like in Ultimate raids. But as they stated at our first Evercold Fanfest, as time went on, they found this 2-minute meta to be ultimately restrictive to their fight design. While they were able to predict when jobs were focusing more on dealing damage, they ended up feeling pressured to design fights to accommodate the 2-minute burst window. While job changes are often made to accommodate for fight design itself, the 2-minute meta forced the opposite. It forced the encounter design to accommodate the job design. And as far as I can tell, that seems to be the complete opposite of their current design philosophy. Modern Final Fantasy XIV raids are focused on encounter design first. The job design is simply meant to help highlight that. Now, whether or not all of this is ultimately good or bad design is completely subjective. Some players like the heavy encounter focus and have enjoyed many of the raids that have been released this expansion. But similarly, a lot of players either don't engage with that type of content, or simply just don't like the direction that job changes have taken. And that's the challenge of navigating job design. I can understand why they would want to make a change like that to Red Mage, to avoid it from potentially being screwed over in a fight again. But to me, those niche cases where you have to change how you play because of a fight is actually what makes jobs fun to me. And this is the complicated part. Some of these changes I can understand and even agree with. I don't think Enochian or Blood of the Dragon needed to be actual buttons that you pressed back in the day. But it's a delicate balance here. How far is too much? And at what point do we hit this threshold where job balancing starts damaging the actual job's identity? That answer depends on your own personal opinion, and that opinion is going to be different from person to person. I'm a firm believer in being nuanced and intentional in this type of approach. There are many changes to jobs that I agree with or personally really enjoy. But at the same time, there are others that I feel have been incredibly heavy-handed and ultimately damaging to some job's identity. Many people would say that this encounter focus is bad design too, and that the game should be focusing more on expanding its job identity and job function. But that brings us to another, equally complicated question. What even defines a job's identity, and what makes it good design in the first place? Yeah, you guessed it again. The answer is, there's no correct answer. There's no definitive right or wrong or good or bad game design. Good design to one person might be horrible design to someone else. And I kind of get that a lot with Samurai. I think this job is awesome and really interesting, but a lot of my friends actually just hate it, and rarely miss an opportunity to remind me of that. And this gets trickier too, because a job's identity, much like the game itself, is also forced to change over time. Whether it be from job-specific adjustments, a new change in how fight design is approached, or even just the necessity of adding 5 new actions or upgrades every single expansion. This in particular is a tough one, because of course you gotta give every job something new each expansion. But some jobs end an expansion with a very complete identity, and don't have a lot of room for new stuff or innovation. That's why we just got a lot of random-ass OGCD follow-ups in Dawntrail, because on a lot of these jobs, what else are you supposed to add at this point? Old actions are eventually forced to give way to new ones as the content cycle necessitates change. And as time goes on, a job's existing identity can grow strange or feel different as new actions or jobs are introduced into the game. We can kind of see this with Gunbreaker and how its usage of cartridges has changed. While in the past, pooling enough cartridges to perform its burst window properly was kind of just the core of the class itself. But as it exists right now, hitting Bloodfest gives you access to all the resources and tools you need to fit everything under No Mercy now, which has just kind of struck me as odd. Now, this is not to say that this was a good or bad change. I'm not a Gunbreaker player, so I don't feel particularly strongly about this one way or the other. It's just interesting to see how their usage of their resources changed so much over this expansion. I had a conversation one night with a friend of mine where we were discussing Reaper and Viper. These jobs are fairly similar in a couple ways, probably the biggest comparison being the similar feeling of Enshroud and Reawaken. Both these sequences are mini burst phases that both jobs can stockpile. The goal of both of these jobs being to try and fit 2 of these burst phases under raid buffs. But the way that these jobs go about these burst phases differs. Reaper has some more restrictions that it needs to work around, maintaining its Death's Design debuff and requiring fairly specific weaving and timing to actually fit their burst properly under buffs. Viper doesn't really have these restrictions. Its buff timers are much more lenient than Death's Design, giving it significantly more flexibility. We can see this distinction with their range tools as well. Reapers get one cast of Harvest Moon unless it has the chance to channel more, in addition to its cast of Communio and occasional Perfectio follow-ups as potential lossless ranged tools. These can be used to keep uptime, but require a fair amount of planning or caveats to be used successfully. Not impossible by any means, but it needs to be done deliberately. By comparison, Viper has Uncoiled Fury, a job-defining action that pretty much ensures they will always have a strong range tool whenever they could possibly need it. Paired with the flexibility of Viper's rotation, and this job can effortlessly weave in and out of melee far more consistently than any other melee job in the game. And this ultimately led me and my friend to a similar conclusion about these jobs and how they were designed. We both viewed them in the same way, but the actual jobs we liked more were different. I prefer Reaper because I like the management of Death's design, planning out Harvest Moon, and finding niche ways to use tools like Communio or Perfectio to keep my uptime. But my friend prefers Viper for its unprecedented flexibility and incredible consistency with uptime due to tools like Uncoiled Fury. If you're asking me, I would say one of these jobs is better designed, but my friend would say the other one is. Is one of us just wrong? Is somebody more correct than the other? Well, no, of course not. My point here is, even if two players come to the same conclusion about something, what they take away from that might still be different. That's one of the big issues that comes with discussing a topic like this. I can't tell you what is or isn't good design. I can only tell you what good design means to me, and that might mean something completely different to you. In fact, it probably does. So I guess the takeaway here is, instead of trying to tell you what I think is good or bad design, I'm just trying to share what I think is fun or interesting, because that's all I can really do. And even with that being said, my taste in jobs has changed too. I used to complain about Dark Knight all the time, but now I just think it's fine, I guess. I still wish I liked it more, but it's okay. I don't really hate it, I just don't feel strongly towards it either. I like its mana management, I like TBN, Living Shadow is still pretty cool, but I don't enjoy the random 1 minute cooldown OGCD tracking, and its 1-2-3 Bloodspiller GCD cycle is just so fucking boring to me. Still, I think it's the Evolve job that I'm ultimately looking forward to the most right now. I have pretty similar feelings about Summoner too. I love Summoners in games, and it's almost always my first go-to. Arcanist was my first job, so it's where I started in 14 as well. But since Endwalker, I just can't stand playing it. I think it's so boring right now. And like, this really bummed me out for a while, but I think it serves an important place in the game. It's easier and more accessible than other casters, and while it may not ever be the best at any specific thing, it will always provide solid value to a team. It's the most generalist caster by far for a myriad of different reasons. And I think a job like this existing is cool and ultimately good for the game, even if it's not for me. My only actual gripe with Summoner is that they just completely removed the pre-existing archetype it had before, and that was a job that I did like. Touching more on my point from earlier, encounter design has outpaced job design for quite a long time now. The types of changes we've seen have been very consistent in Dawntrail, and with them we've seen a pretty clear shift in how fight design has changed as well. The overall state of the game now is vastly different compared to how it's been in the past, and most of the jobs in the game come from an era before Dawntrail, or Endwalker, or even Shadowbringers. Fight design has changed a lot in that time, and the design team has scrambled to change or adjust jobs to make sure they still work and function in the modern style of raids we have now. Most of these jobs existed in a time before knowing how to do snake prio or solve a limit cut was just a given in a raid. Because the game is so different now, some things that used to make these jobs unique have had to be left behind. And that's the main reason I'm actually so excited for Evolved jobs in the first place. One of the main promises with the mode is to add uniqueness and identity back into job design, which means it's a chance for job design to actually catch up with how fight design has changed. These modes don't need to be rooted in the foundations of their design like the reborn jobs we have now have been. With this mode, they can actually re-evaluate what makes each job unique, and find ways to implement and expand on that with modern fight design in mind. And I think this is something they've really struggled with across many of our Legacy Reborn jobs. This is one of the reasons why the new jobs in every expansion always end up being so popular. Obviously part of it is players just wanting to try out the new thing, but players enjoy these types of jobs that fit well with current encounter design, and I think Evolved as a mode is meant to expand on this even further. So far we've seen Dragoons with their sky-high dive, Paladins with unique counterattacks, Bard with cast times and varied song stances, and I think this looks really promising. I'm of the opinion that a little bit really goes a long way when it comes to a job feeling fresh and fun. It really doesn't take a lot to make something fun or interesting. I mean, seriously, one of my favorite things about playing Samurai is that I have to stand still and cast to do my damage. This job makes standing still fun for me, and that's the appeal of the entire caster role. It feels so good to be able to plan out and properly optimize your movement across different fights with their own unique movement requirements. It's cool. So like, seriously, if we've been able to make standing still as fun as it is, we really don't need to add a whole lot to these jobs to help them feel cool or exciting again. It just has to be done in a clever or interesting way. The new Dragoon LB from PvP is unlike anything else we've seen in the game, and Paladin having unique counterattack follow-ups is also an entirely new mechanic. The closest thing we even have to that is Samurai's Third Eye / Tengetsu, but your reward for timing that is just a little bit of extra gauge, and it's on a DPS that's going to be taking far less damage than a tank will. And don't get me wrong, I love Tengetsu, this button is awesome, but a mechanic like this is going to feel so much different on a dedicated tank, and that could be really cool if they lean into it properly. The function of these types of mechanics is similar, but the context in which they exist in each jobs kit and the feeling you get from doing them are going to be completely different. And this brings me to one more topic that I wanted to discuss, which is the distinction between job feeling and job function, because I think trying to define this can help expand how we view job design as a whole. Job function is the role a job actually has in a party. The function is the thing the job is actually mechanically doing. So a healer's function is, well, to heal. But a job's feeling can define how these jobs actually go about fulfilling their function. It's about how it feels to do your job. And both of these can be a valid means of defining job identity. I think the clearest example of this is the distinction between both barrier healers, Scholar, and Sage. Functionally, these jobs have literally the exact same role. They're both shield healers that apply team-wide mitigation to help the party survive heavy hits of raid-wide damage. And in terms of the actual specifics of their healing and mit, both of these jobs have actions that are basically one-to-one in comparison, nearly mirroring each other identically. But the actual feeling of playing both of these jobs, I think most people would agree, is very different. Scholar is bound to their fairy pet who applies a good portion of their healing and mitigation from a pet that you control independently from yourself. And while Scholar does boast Ruin 2 for technically infinite free movement, while optimizing, your intention is to minimize as many casts as possible, planning out your weave windows deliberately and slide casting everything around your broil instead, to contribute as much damage as possible. Energy Drain also allows you to convert excess healing into extra damage, rewarding you more for planning out and optimizing your heals efficiently. By comparison, Sage is designed to be much more fluid and sleek. All of their shields and mits are centered off of them, and they're uniquely able to apply their shields while moving, giving them a comfortable OGCD weave window to boot. To complement this is a 30-second gap close in Icarus, and a relatively pronounced set of damaging actions to incentivize a more active feeling playstyle, with a much bigger emphasis on their personal damage. They're given a partial refund on their shields breaking in the form of Toxicon, which allows them extra instant cast movement in a fight, and the unique capability to gain damage off of it in certain multi-target scenarios, since it cleaves for AoE damage. The actual functionality of these jobs is almost one-to-one, at least as far as their actual healing goes, but the feeling and playstyle of them is pretty distinct. Most of my friends prefer the far less clunky Sage, but as time has gone on, I've come to kind of appreciate the weirdness of Scholar, as many aspects of its design just aren't seen anywhere else. And honestly, for a long time, I was hoping to see changes to Scholar to make it less weird or clunky, but in a way, that's kind of what actually makes it unique. Actual pet management, a lack of lossless instant casts, and the ability to directly sacrifice your healing resources for more damage gives Scholars some very unique optimization that you just can't find anywhere else in the game right now. Okay, so what am I really trying to say here? What's the takeaway here? What's the point of even having these conversations in the first place? Well, I don't know. There kind of isn't one. But even if there isn't really a main takeaway here, I don't think that means that having these conversations are just worthless either. There's value in simply sharing more perspectives, even if we don't fully understand why we feel the ways we do, even if we don't necessarily have an answer for a problem that we perceive. Conversations like this are what motivate changes in the first place, whether that's changes with the game itself, or just changes in our own perspectives and how we see the game. No matter what happens, these conversations are going to be inevitable. No change they can possibly make will ever make everyone happy. It doesn't matter how cool or unique or interesting Evolved ends up being, some people just won't like it. Still, I don't think that means that these conversations are without value. There's a common saying that people who play games will find a way to optimize the fun out of anything and everything. And while I understand the sentiment of it, I also feel like this is kind of blown a little bit out of proportion. Final Fantasy XIV does not exist in a state where the entire game has been solved, or plays itself, or has been fully optimized to a point where there's no longer any fun to be had. And even if it were, we will be getting new things to try out as players in only a handful of months now. And still, I think we can find value in these types of discussions by trying to define enjoyment for ourselves. What do you find fun? What kind of jobs are for you? Ultimately, that matters far more for you than anything anyone else on the internet can say. Of course, myself included. And if you haven't really sat down and thought about it much, maybe try giving it a go. Knowing what you like matters. Knowing what you want or what you're looking for matters. Knowing what you don't like matters. And there's value in sharing that with yourself as well as the others around you. Even at the absolute highest levels of play in pretty much any game, there's no correct choice for what class or job or character you should be playing. Sure, a game's meta might try and tell you what characters are better or worse, but no matter how solved a game has become, there will always be someone pushing the boundaries of a character, a class, or a job that they truly believe in. Because we're human beings, not machines. We don't always make the most logical or optimal choice, because that's just not what being a human is about. We play what speaks to us, for whatever reason that may be. And that's the beauty of it, because those reasons will always be different from person to person. Even now in current Final Fantasy XIV, there's still a plethora of variety, job skill expression, and nuance to be found across so many of the jobs currently in the game. And with Evercold, there's only going to be more of that. There's definitely been a few hurdles across this expansion, but I still believe the development team is trying their hardest to create a system that people are happy with. I don't agree with every change, in fact there's quite a few that I disagree with, but I think I understand the vision, and I'm excited to see where it goes with Evercold. And if nothing else, I hope that you are too.